Our river, Susquehanna, the legend is it floods every 14 years. That's what the geologists tell us, the hydrologists tell us. This goes back to times where indigenous peoples were using this river. It's also a really flood-prone river in terms of its geology. So if you look over at the Delaware or the Hudson River, those riverbeds are super deep. And when waters come down and rush in rain events, the waters can scour the bottom and rip away at sediment and carve out space for waters to go down rather than up. But the Susquehanna is very shallow, and as soon as you go down a little bit beneath that sediment, you hit hard rock. So when water comes in, it just stacks. It can't penetrate the hard bedrock underneath. So there's a geological context to our flood risk here, in addition to that kind of social memory of we're going to be facing another flood like we did with Agnes.
The hurricane that was coming up from the Caribbean was Hurricane Agnes, and it got downgraded over Georgia, and that was going to be the end of it. And we read a story saying that Tropical Storm Agnes blows out over Georgia. We were done with it.
If you look at some like old satellite images of Agnes, I mean, it really did stretch in the atmosphere across a huge geography. Like many tropical storms, it came up the Atlantic coast, kind of cut in through New York, and then sat over Pennsylvania.
Agnes occurred in June, and it was a little bit of a different kind of storm, right? A week or so beforehand, there was a lot of water, a lot of rain, and so when Agnes, the hurricane, or remnant tropical storm, came through, the ground was saturated and the water levels were already high.
There was another cold front coming from the west, which made the tropical storm stall over PA and grow. The full story of Agnes is an American story, but the lasting impact of Agnes, how people's lives were upended, how waterways were completely transformed, how towns were destroyed and then had to build back, that's a Susquehanna story. That's a Pennsylvania story. Property damage is $3 billion, but $2 billion of that was in Pennsylvania, and that's $2 billion in 1972 money. 120 people died because of Agnes, 50 of those in Pennsylvania, the most of any state. 200,000 people in Pennsylvania were rendered homeless from Agnes, 70,000 structures uninhabitable. So we really feel that impact of Agnes right here in the Susquehanna.
We have an early guesstimate of perhaps 28,000 homes needed throughout the state of Pennsylvania.
So many of these towns have an imprint of Agnes on them.
When Pennsylvania was really developing in the 1700s, transportation at the time was rivers and streams.
The river was the old highway. The river was the center of trade and transport for hundreds of years.
And so some of what you see for flood vulnerability was set in place in the 1700s, 1800s, and later.
Selinsgrove is an interesting town because it symbolizes our deep history on the Susquehanna. Isle of Q is the center of all of that. The Isle of Q is a stretch of houses and buildings that can't be any closer to Penns Creek and the Susquehanna River.
1972 changed the Isle of Q forever. It was tragic, but a year later, it was a better place. I have folks even in Selinsgrove that say, oh, why don't you people just move? Why don't you get out of here? This is my life.